Okay, the final item of business this evening is the members' business debate on motion 18802 in the name of Michelle Thomson on St Andrew's Day 2025. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd invite members to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Michelle Thomson to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. At least since the 9th century AD, St Andrew has been revered in Scotland. His formal status was enshrined in an official act by the Scottish nation through the signing of the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320. The document, written to the Pope, formally declared St Andrew as a patron, and he has remained so ever since. The date of November the 30th is traditionally considered his day of execution and held to be on a saltire cross. Of course, Scotland is not the only nation whose patron saint is St Andrew. Other places, from Ukraine to Barbados, have also adopted him, and he's patron saint of many other groups, from fishermen to singers to farm workers and many others. His values can be said to embrace humility, perhaps reflecting the fact that he was a fisherman before becoming a disciple. Courage, faith, generosity and solidarity are also considered to be his values. The former member of the Scottish Parliament, Dennis Canavan, introduced his St Andrew's Day Bank Holiday Bill in 2005, and that became law in January 2007. Dennis Canavan is a well-kent figure in Falkirk District and has used his legendary powers of persuasion to convince me to convene the cross-party group for St Andrew's Day, and I acknowledge his contribution. We therefore now have a recognised patron saint, a recognised patron saint day, and recognised symbol in the form of a saltire and a formal bank holiday. However, I feel we still have more work to do to ensure we use these values and our Scottish assets to their best advantage. Now, I note the activities of the Scottish Government and its supporting partners set out in a recent letter from the Cabinet Secretary to our CPG and his planned visit to speak with us on the 21st of January. But I would welcome hearing more about what specifically is planned for this year. Compared, for example, to St Patrick's Day celebrations and the promotion of Ireland, Scotland still lags in utilising the opportunity of St Andrew's Day. Now, I see clear examples of cultural diplomacy encouraged by the Scottish Government, but not yet at the scale we need. Now, I anticipate the problem is one of both funding and capacity, and having to deliver through people, partners and organisations, but a well-thought-out strategy is essential. The year before becoming an MSP, I co-authored research into the Scottish business diaspora with around 1,200 participants in a study from 74 different countries, and the results were very clear. There is a high regard for Scotland, from its cultural richness to its business acumen, and for once maybe we can add its footballing prowess. But our diaspora were of the opinion we could do much more to promote the richness of what Scotland has to offer and do more to engage with them for both economic and cultural benefits. Before looking further of Scotland, let me reflect on the importance of the culture sector for those living in Scotland. According to the Scottish Household Survey, 88% of adults in Scotland are culturally engaged, either having attended or visited a cultural event or place, or having participated in a cultural activity annually. Findings from this survey indicate that in 2023, 47% of adults agree that culture and the arts make a positive difference to their life, and 51% agreed that culture and the arts make a positive difference to their local community. Yet there's still comparatively little celebration on St Andrew's Day, which should be an opportunity to bring the entire Scottish community together in cultural celebration. The approach thus far...
Will you accept an intervention?
I will indeed.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you for taking an intervention. In 2032, we will see the 1200th anniversary of the Battle of Athol Stanford, when the Picts and Scots famously saw the saltire in the sky, inspiring them to defeat the invading Anglo-Saxons. Given what you've talked about in terms of the diaspora and culture, do you think that the Scottish Government should work towards 2032 as a major celebration of St Andrew and what is the world's oldest flag?
Always through the chair. Michelle Thomson.
Delighted to agree with my colleague Kenneth Gibson in that suggestion. So I would say that the approach thus far has been to encourage rather than mandate, and I don't disagree with that approach, but I think the encouragement should be more encouraging. There are pockets of activity in some local councils, but no wholesale and unified approach encouraged by the likes of COSLA. Some schools teach about St Andrews and the fact that this is our national day, but too many still don't. And this Parliament, this Scottish Parliament, should also do more. Each year I've been here, I've encouraged this, but I've never managed to get to the point where activities, not least a celebration here, is the norm. The International Strategy report published 2 weeks ago outlines Scotland's considerable international trading footprint, including the facts that Scotland's seen 135 inward investment projects secured, and that maintains Scotland's position as the UK's top destination for FDI, foreign direct investment outside London. 2.5 billion export sales and 1.89 billion capital investment, supported by international trade missions and ministerial visits. So Scotland is building many relationships to promote Scotland's renewable potential, including offshore wind deployment and the supply of hydrogen to new industries across Europe, supporting the green energy transition and our climate goals. The beauty, of course, of Scotland is an important factor in attracting international tourism. And I feel that our tourism sector should be commended for the strides it's made in supporting high-quality tourism in recent years. And modest though it may be, we've contributed £1 million towards humanitarian assistance in 10 countries. Other initiatives, such as the Global Scot Network, a number of international education programmes are continuing to develop. So there is good news. Our arts organisations do superb work to promote Scotland culturally, and the Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the standing ovations the RSNO achieved in Salzburg when in tour. But how much they all do already, even when performing at home, to take St Andrews to the world and to bring him home. Again, my message is that so much more could be done. In finishing then, why then should we promote St Andrew's Day more effectively? It would represent an occasion for bringing both domestic and international audiences together. It could and should celebrate the best of Scotland, bringing people together in a world filled with division. We can and should do more. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Thomson. We move to the open debate. I call first Stephen Kerr to be followed by Paul McLennan. Up to 4 minutes. Mr. Kerr.
Well, I congratulate Michelle Thomson on her motion and indeed on her speech. And I completely agree with her about the importance of us coming together and celebrating with some patriotic fervour what it means to be Scottish and bringing us all together, as we saw, I think, last Tuesday. When, and indeed in this chamber the next day, when there was much celebration of what had been achieved by Scotland's men's football team. But St Andrew's Day does need to be better celebrated and better embraced by us here at home, and inviting the rest of the world to join us in such a celebration is a first-class idea. It is one of the world's oldest national days. It's rooted deep in the story of Scotland. The 14th century, I think, was mentioned. I couldn't quite catch the number. It's very ancient, shall we say that. And reference was made as well, of course, to the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320, the famous address to Pope John the 22nd, seeking recognition of Scotland. And there, in black ink on parchment, they named St Andrew as the nation's patron and protector. This was no ornamentation. They were presenting Scotland's cause as part of a divine story, placing Andrew at the heart of the Scottish identity, a symbol of faith, freedom and nationhood. And that symbolism endured into the Union of 1707. Article 1 of the Treaty of Union required a new flag, combining the crosses of St George and St Andrew. And discussions ensued that neither cross dominated, producing a Union flag that visually represented a partnership of the two nations. Scotland's identity and Andrew's legacy were therefore woven directly into the fabric of the new United Kingdom. And in the centuries after the Union, St Andrew's importance has only grown. His saltire has become a marker of pride and heritage, and St Andrew's societies emerged right across the Scottish diaspora, especially in North America, helping communities abroad maintain their culture, customs and traditions. Their celebrations helped make St Andrew's Day internationally recognised long before it was formally recognised, even here at home. I give way to Keith Brown.
Keith Brown.
Just following up on what the member was saying, and also the intervention previously heard from Kenny Gibson, the member may be aware that 1028, so in 2 years' time, marks the 1000th anniversary of the tale when King David I was gored by a stag, or about to be gored by a stag, in Holyrood Park, and then a cross appeared in the stag's antlers, which gave this place, this Parliament, its name, Holy Cross or Holyrood. And does he think we should be looking to make sure, does the member think, we should look to make sure that we commemorate that as well as a part of Scotland's heritage?
Stephen Kerr.
Oh, absolutely. We should miss no opportunity to come together and celebrate our Scottishness and Scotland among ourselves and also before the rest of the world. But I want to raise a serious point as well, if you will allow me, Presiding Officer, and that is in relation to the issue I raised in connection with the Union. Because often, I have to say that, in fact, I've lost count of the number of times that my support for Scotland's place within the United Kingdom has led some on the other side of the argument, the constitutional argument, to question my love for my country. But I am first and foremost patriotically Scottish. I love Scotland, the people, the history, the way of life we enjoy. It's worth defending. And I wish to quote George Orwell, who once drew a clear line between patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism, he wrote, is a devotion to a particular place and way of life. Nationalism is about power. And too often in Scotland, the government seeks to fuse the two, insisting that loyalty to one party, the SNP, is loyalty to Scotland itself, questioning their policies or their performance in government, and you are often accused of talking Scotland down, and it just isn't true, because patriotism includes the duty to challenge a government when it fails. And this Scottish Government has presided over decline in education, in manufacturing, in the freedoms that have long defined Scottish life. Burns captured the danger of elites acting in their own interest rather than the common good. In The Jolly Beggars, he wrote, "A fig for those by law protected, liberty's a glorious feast. Courts for cowards were erected, churches built to please the priest." Those lines remind us that power can serve itself if left unchecked, a lesson that resonates today. So I conclude, Presiding Officer, because I remain hopeful, because Scotland, the real Scotland, remains the best place in the world, hard-working, open, neighbourly and honest. We have a way of life worth preserving. Above the doors of this Parliament are the words of Alistair Gray. Work as if you live in the early days of a better nation. That is a call to hope, not partisanship.
Thank you. I now call Paul McLennan to be followed by Carol Mochan. Up to 4 minutes. Mr McLennan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I thank Michelle Thomson for bringing forward this debate today. St Andrew is, of course, our patron saint, and we share that honour with Russia, Ukraine, Barbados and others, as Michelle has mentioned. St Andrew has been celebrated in Scotland for over 1,000 years, with feasts being held in his honour as far back as the year 1000 AD. And, of course, it wasn't until 1320, when Scotland's independence was declared with the signing of the Declaration of Arbroath, that he officially became Scotland's patron saint. Since then, St Andrews became an important part of Scottish society that Michelle Thomson mentioned. And of course, the flag of Scotland is the Solitaire. Now, with so many different connections to our country, it's worth considering how St Andrew came to be so important to Scotland. So who was St Andrew? And I think it's important to remember around about the Christian background of obviously St Andrew as well. And I'll talk about how inclusive that message is as well further on in my speech. Of course, St Andrew preached the gospel on the lands around about the Black Sea and in Greece, and was eventually crucified on an X-shaped cross in Patras. During his visit in 1969, Pope Paul VI gave relics of St Andrew to Scotland with the words, "St Peter gives you his brother," and these are now displayed in St Mary's Catholic Church in Edinburgh. Elsternford in East Lothian, Athelstanford, as many people would pronounce it, but Elsternford is the local pronunciation, is the birthplace of Scotland's national flag, the St Andrew's Cross, as the Solitaire. And as Kenny Gibson mentioned, legend has it the flag originated in the Battle of in 832, fought close by the village. An army of Picts or Scots under King Angus had been on a raid into Northumbrian territory, but were pursued and caught by a larger force of Angles and Saxons under Athelstan. Fearing the outcome, Angus prayed for deliverance and was rewarded by the appearance overhead of a white solitaire against a blue sky. The King vowed that if he gained the victory, then Andrew would thereafter be the patron saint of Scotland. The Scots did win, and in due course the Saltire became the flag of Scotland. This Sunday, the First Minister will be present in the St Andrews Day event in Elsinford. It's an event I've been attending for many years with an immense sense of pride. Now, 4 years ago, when I was elected, I was asked to chair the St Andrews Day cross-party group. The group has two fantastic people, as many others, and Dennis Canavan, who, of course, in previous parliaments ensured St Andrews Day was marked as a public holiday. And many of us, of course, will know Joe Goldblatt, and it's my pleasure to work with them both as well. And Joe obviously contributes from the culture angle of things. There's one key thing, I think, for me, and I think I've chatted about this with Michelle Thomson about this. We have to mark St Andrews Day formally in our Parliament. When I arranged the event in 2022, I couldn't believe that Parliament didn't do so formally. And I think that's something that Michelle Thomson and I have discussed, and I think that would be something I'd like to take forward with the Cabinet Secretary as well. I know it's a Parliament issue, but we should be marking St Andrews Day formally in the Parliament. St Andrews Day for me is all about who we are as a nation, what our values are and how inclusive we are, whether we believe in the Union or as Scotland as an independent nation. It's all about love, it's about compassion and it's respect for all. The values of St Andrew.
Would you give way quickly?
Yes, of course.
Michelle Thomson.
I'll be as quick as I can because I'm very respectful of his time. I mean, yes, I give absolute respect that your office set up and managed the inaugural St Andrews Night in this place. My office then took it over, but the fact was that that was 2 years where our local offices, we had to give up our resource to do that, and we were unable to persuade the Parliament to carry it on, thus leaving either us to do that, which didn't seem right.
Yeah,
Paul McLennan.
Just to reiterate that point, and again, I think it's something that's really important as we go forward. Now, last week at Hampden, in what was a magnificent result, we've seen the Saltire at its best. I've been at Hampden many times where there's been 10,000 there and whatever, and the Saltire's flown away, but proudly waved as we qualified for the first World Cup for the first time in 28 years. It lifted the mood of the nation. There's no doubt about that. And in the time of the rise of the far right, we must redouble efforts to promote the values of inclusivity, respect, love and compassion. We must push back on those who promote fear and information. That's something every single one of us has a responsibility to do. We have to work hard to address inequalities by empowering our communities and ensuring that they are fully recognised and supported as a valued part of our society. The Saltire St Andrews Day can play a major part in that. Kindness plays a reeling role in the purpose of St Andrews Day, and this offers a timely moment to reflect on our purpose and come together in our communities. Thanks, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call Carol Mochan to be followed by Christine Graham. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Michelle Thomson for bringing this to the Chamber. And I'm really pleased to be speaking in the debate today. And I would really like to acknowledge the work of the cross-party group on St Andrews Day, the people who continue to have that cross-party group. But of course, its members that others have mentioned, and it was mentioned in the motion, it identifies the ongoing work of the former MP and MSP Dennis Canavan to ensure that St Andrews Day continues to be an important day that recognises our patron saint. And of course, he drove forward that bank holiday to be enjoyed by everyone. As a proud Scot, I do believe it is really nice and really important like many other countries across the world, we do celebrate our patron saint as part of celebrating our history, our culture and our country. When I was young, I had family who lived abroad for many years, and they really enjoyed St Andrews Day and saw it as a great opportunity to invite international friends over to enjoy and celebrate Scotland, but also that real wonder of cultures from right across the world. Enjoying each other's culture was so important to them. For Scotland, St Andrew means the patron saint and national symbol, officially, as others have said, recognised in the 1320 Declaration of Arbroath. The relationship is represented by the Saltire flag, the blue and white X-shaped cross, also symbolising the way St Andrew was martyred. But also, as the motion states, we also need to acknowledge the economic benefits that global recognition brings to Scotland through the culture, business, education, tourism and retail sectors, supported by the use of the Saltire as both the national flag and, as mentioned in the motion, that Brand Scotland identifier of Scottish produce and marketing. And we see it here, and often I'm sure others will see it when they're abroad. They'll notice our flag, and you see it in supermarkets and in shopping, retail and stuff. Wherever you go, really, we've got great relationships across the world. We also know that St Andrew's Day is recognised and celebrated across the world by people who believe they have a connection to Scotland, known as the Scottish diaspora. That consists of Scottish people who emigrated. We know that we were a great nation for immigrating right across the world. And of course now their descendants, which is estimated to be anything between 30 and 40 million people. In my own South Scotland region, I know there are plenty going on this week to celebrate traditional things like traditional ceilidhs, also a mixture of some of our other important history or institutions, like in my own area, the local Burns Club are having an evening event to celebrate St Andrews, and even a karaoke, which I'm sure those who are attending are very pleased that I'll be at the amendments later tonight, so I will not be singing in Ayrshire this evening. But, Presiding Officer, in a world where there is such division as today, I do hope, as we celebrate St Andrew's Day, and others have said this, we can look beyond the division to a message of hope and unity that we in this country and across the world so desperately need. And we know that St Andrew would have hoped for that also. So thank you again to Michelle for bringing this to the Chamber and for all the contributions this evening.
Thank you, Ms Mochen. I now call Christine Graham to be followed by John Mason. Up to 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I congratulate the member on bringing forward this debate just days before St Andrew's Day itself. I too recognise the role of my former colleague Dennis Canavan, who with tenacity drove through the St Andrew's Day Bank Holiday Scotland Act 2007, passed unanimously on 29 November 2006. I ken because I was there. As he said, speaking on moving the bill, and I quote, "At one time St Andrew's Day was a popular day of festivities throughout Scotland, but unfortunately domestic celebrations have dwindled over the years. That was 16 years ago, and despite it being a bank holiday in Scotland, I think that remains the case. I searched to find St Andrew's celebrations in my constituency, but while I have no doubt there will be some, they are not large scale. I wondered why. But perhaps it's because Burns Night on 25th January has captured that as a celebration of Scotland. After all, he was a man who wrote in Scots internationally, whose lyrics ring out as one year turns to another. But there is room for both. One celebrates for me the essence of our culture of "We're all Jock Thomson's bairns," expressed by Burns as "a man's a man for all that." The other, our affection, protection of Scotland as a nation. So it need not be an either-or. St Andrew's Day celebrates this most ancient of nations, said to have been founded in 843 AD by Kenneth MacAlpine, uniting the Gallic kingdom of Dalriata with the Picts, establishing the kingdom of Alba, often considered the birth of modern Scotland. Our boundary with our near neighbour has remained relatively fixed, apart from the toing and froing of Berwick, a Scottish town if ever I saw one, some 13 times, eventually landing on the English side in 1482, where it has remained ever since. But to coin a phrase, what did the Romans ever do for us? Well, they failed to conquer Scotland in their successful invasion of Britain in 43 AD. In less than 40 years, they had reached and subdued what we now know as Northern England and Wales. Before them lay the wilds of Caledonia, and by 79 AD they were pushing northwards into southern Scotland. Here, at the place of the Three Hills, or Trimontium in Latin, near Melrose in my constituency, they began to construct a fort to be used as a complex in Scotland. Some 17,000 occupied there at one time, and the same site was to be used several times over the next 100 years or more. But Scotland was to remain defiantly intact to this day. Perhaps that's what the Romans did for us. It took the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, then her son with the Union of the Crowns acceding to the English throne, later the Treaty of Union, for Scotland to be united with England, but it was and remains an uneasy union. Unlike the English, for whom Parliament is sovereign, we, the Scottish people, are sovereign. That is embedded in the declaration of Arbroath, and that is why any UK monarch is King or Queen of Scots, not Scotland. In the past, attempts were made to kill our culture, to ban the bagpipes after the 1745 rebellion, the Dress Act of 1745 banning the wearing of the kilt, demeaning speaking in our native tongue and not the Queen's English. I went and seen is not slang, but Scots dialect. But here we are, a nation wearing the kilt with the skirl of the pipes all in fashion, from weddings to funerals to football to rugby. I was tempted to say to infinity and beyond, because the Saltire is recognised worldwide as Scotland's flag. I ken, because I've seen it. So let's celebrate St Andrew's Day, demonstrating that despite all those centuries when there have been so many attempts to diminish, if not erase, our Scottishness, here we are, as Scottish as ever. And I say this proudly as one born in England to an English mother. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call the final speaker in the open debate, John Mason, up to 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Michelle Thomson for bringing this debate. I thought we'd focus on Andrew himself. To start with, we might consider what we mean by a saint. On reading the Christian scriptures, the Bible, a saint is used for every follower of Jesus Christ, not just for a few. So these were not exceptionally good people, but people who believed that Jesus had been punished in their place, and so their sins had been forgiven and they had been gifted eternal life. However, over time, a tradition built up that some people were somehow extra special and so were called saints, that there would still be disagreement within the Christian Church as to exactly what we mean by a saint. Nevertheless, Andrew is categorised as a saint by both definitions, so I thought I would look at what we know of Andrew in the Christian Scriptures. John's Gospel tells us that Andrew was previously a disciple of or follower of John the Baptist, no connection to myself, and John told them that Jesus was the Lamb of God. Now, that was a reference back to the Jewish Scriptures, or Old Testament as we call them, when God had led the Jews out of captivity in Egypt, and they had to sacrifice a Passover lamb and were protected from the final plague by the lamb's blood. So Andrew becomes the first follower of Jesus, but immediately finds his brother Peter and introduces him as well. Andrew says to Peter, "We have found the Messiah," and thus he becomes the first person to recognise who Jesus really was, the Son of God, that is, he was God, and was the new leader of the Jews, whom they had been looking forward to for so long. Another time we read about Andrew is at what is called the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus had been teaching a large crowd out in the countryside, and the people were getting hungry. How to feed them? It is Andrew who finds a boy with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and brings them all to Jesus, admitting that they are not much. But Jesus performs a miracle and feeds everyone. So for the second time, we see Andrew bringing someone to Jesus, and it also shows Andrew was a practical kind of person. He could see there was a big problem. He did not know what the complete answer was, but he threw in his tuppence worth, and God used it and blessed it. And that is a good example for us. We can at least try and contribute a little to solving problems, even if we cannot fully tackle or maybe even understand the whole thing. And our third picture of Andrew comes when some Greeks went to see Jesus. Now, it's worth remembering that Jesus and all his disciples were Jewish, and there was quite a cultural divide between Jews and Greeks. But these Greeks first speak to another disciple, Philip, and it's worth noting that Philip and Andrew were both Jews but had Greek names, so may have been more approachable. And Philip may have been unsure what to do, so he turns to Andrew, and it is Andrew who goes to Jesus with the issue. So for the third time, we see Andrew bringing someone to Jesus, very much a theme in what we know about him. And Philip obviously felt that Andrew was somebody with whom he could share a problem. So we have a picture of Andrew as someone very solid and dependable, someone to whom others came to help, for help or with questions. So overall, it seems to me that Andrew is something of an unsung hero. He is mentioned 12 times in the Gospels, and 4 of these as part of a list of the disciples' names. And after that, in the book of Acts, which tells the story of the early church, he is mentioned just once. But I think from what we do know of him, Andrew is someone to whom we can look up and take as an example. His brother Peter is much better known and was the first leader of the early church after Jesus had left to go to heaven. So, like Andrew, we may not be in the limelight all of the time, and many of our constituents are in the same situation. People who serve faithfully as volunteers, carers, parents of disabled children, or conscientiously working in a poorly paid job. Such folk may never be recognised, paid high salaries, or given awards. But like Andrew, they serve faithfully, and we should be grateful for all of them, just as I believe we should be grateful for Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mason. I now call on Angus Robertson to wind up the debate. Cabinet Secretary, up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. May I begin by thanking Michelle Thomson for the opportunity to debate St Andrew's Day today, and as we close this debate, for us to be able to reflect on what St Andrew's Day truly represents, not only for Scotland, but for Scots everywhere, and also for people who love Scotland everywhere. It's more than a date in the calendar, it's a celebration of who we are, a nation with deep roots and global reach, as we've heard, proud of our heritage, confident in our future. Michelle Thomson began her introductory speech by saying it was a huge opportunity to promote Scotland, and I agree with her. And she raised a comparison with Ireland. And it's worth having a look at what Ireland does every year. This year, 38 representatives of the Irish state took part in St Patrick's Day events in more than 90 cities in 40 countries. There's much that we can learn about the promotion of Scotland on our National Day from our Celtic cousins. She also raised the opportunity of cooperating with the culture sector, better at home and abroad, as part of St Andrew's Day celebrations, and I'll be pleased to take that away and raise with culture sector colleagues. There was an intervention from Kenneth Gibson about the anniversary of the Battle of Athelstaneford, and Paul McLennan, as the member for East Lothian, who was well placed, of course, to remind us about the origin of St Andrew and Scotland's national flag. He raised the call for a support from across the chamber for a formal event marking St Andrew's Day in the Scottish Parliament, and I join him in that. To Stephen Kerr, delighted to hear him call for the promotion of Scotland at home and abroad. We should miss no opportunity. He was absolutely right, so I look forward to him talking up international promotion of Scotland and the diaspora in future. To Carol Mochan, she paid tribute to the cross-party group, and I can take this opportunity to join her in doing so. And she also talked about the opportunities, as others have done, for the promotion of Scotland. And for colleagues who are not aware of the Brand Scotland strategic partnership that the Scottish Government chairs, it brings together our public bodies, Visit Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, Scottish universities, and. If colleagues haven't yet been to www.scotland.org and made use of the promotional materials to promote Scotland, please do. They are free to use. And I look forward to colleagues across the chamber making the most of that. She also pointed out she drew attention to diaspora Scots who had left the country, and she's right to do so. However, I think it's important for us to take the opportunity in 2025. Diaspora means more than that. It also includes those who want to be associated with Scotland. People who've studied here, people who've lived here, people who've travelled here. And the Scottish Connections framework is again something I would commend to members to have a look at what we're trying to do in terms of reaching out to Scotland's historic, current and no doubt future diaspora as an opportunity at St Andrew's Day, but throughout the rest of the year as well. Christine Graham, I thought, brought some wonderful historic context for St Andrew's Day, and John Mason, the religious context as well. The latest Public Insight Monitor shows that over a quarter of people in Scotland do mark St Andrew's Day. It's a clear sign of its growing importance in our national life. St Andrew's Day reminds us that Scotland is one of the oldest nations in the international community, yet one that continues to innovate and inspire. It's a day that unites us across communities, faiths, continents, from Edinburgh to Eindhoven, from Glasgow to Guelph. Scots and friends of Scotland will gather to celebrate our shared identity and values. This is not just about tradition, it's about opportunity, and the Scottish Government's Scottish Connections framework sets out a clear ambition to strengthen ties with our diaspora, to build cultural, educational, economic links that benefit Scotland and our global partners, and today's debate has shown that St Andrew's Day is a powerful platform for that ambition. I recently had the privilege of hosting the Argentine ambassador, along with esteemed guests from Buenos Aires, to celebrate our shared passion for rugby and mark 200 years of cultural connection. The historic ties between Scotland and Argentina run deep, And reminders of this enduring relationship can be seen throughout Buenos Aires, where references to St Andrew, San Andrés are woven into the city's identity. We heard members make mention of the diaspora in North America, but I think it's oft forgotten Argentina has the 5th largest Scottish diaspora in the world. Every celebration abroad, whether in countries that share St Andrews as a patron saint or where our diaspora thrives, tells Scotland's story and opens doors for trade, opens doors for tourism, opens doors for cultural exchange. This week I will join friends in Switzerland and Germany to showcase Scotland's strengths in innovation, in energy, in life sciences and the creative industries, while exploring new opportunities for collaboration. Many of my ministerial colleagues will also champion Scotland internationally in Ireland, in Belgium and also in London, alongside our global network of offices hosting activities to mark the day. And I'd like to pay tribute to our international network of Scottish Government offices, of Scottish Development International staff in a further 30 locations and over 1,200 global Scots. We owe a debt of gratitude to Dennis Canavan, whose determination ensured St Andrew's Day became a national holiday. His work reminds us that when we act together across parties and sectors, we achieve lasting change. And that spirit of collaboration is exactly what we need now as we deepen Scotland's international connections. And finally, let us remember that St Andrew himself is a figure who transcends borders, a patron saint shared by many nations, a symbol of unity in diversity. And in that spirit, I commend all of those who will celebrate St Andrew's Day here and around the world. Together we can ensure this National Day continues to bring people closer, forging new pathways and tell Scotland's story with pride. Presiding Officer, Scotland is a global nation. Scotland is connected, and on St Andrew's Day, Scotland shines. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting of Parliament.